Theories of the Mourning Wyrm's fate, from the Killer and Keeper universe. To this day, no soul has seen the Mourning Wyrm since its descent into the Ash Deep's final chasm, a rift so vast and ancient it is said to predate the stars themselves, rimmed with obsidian spires that weep molten tears which calcify into grotesque, contorted faces, half-formed and forever screaming, and hum with subterranean resonance, as if echoing the worm's final cries. The chasm's walls are lined with runes half swallowed by magma flows, some still faintly pulsing as if in mourning. Above, the sky is perpetually bruised and roiling, refusing starlight, as though the heavens themselves turn their gaze away. Flocks of blind carrion birds circle the chasm but never land, as if tethered by invisible grief. Some whisper they are cursed watchers, once mortal sentinels bound by penance to orbit the abyss for all time, their hollow cries echoing sins they no longer remember. And it is said, even echoes fear to return from its depths. The void it left behind festers with rumor and dread, a wound in the world's memory that seeps into dreams and derelict scripture. It is said that famed warriors and beasts of old, drawn by some ancestral pull or promise of final stillness, have chosen this abyss as their grave. Among them, Seer Thorn of the Hollow Lance, who rode his dying war steed into the chasm clad in dusk iron and wreaths of black flame, his lance etched with the names of every comrade who fell beneath his watch. The twin basilisks of Narthun, brood spawn of the Forgotten Marsh, and once revered as divine adjudicators in the War of Sable Thrones, whose mere gaze could halt armies and unmake siege engines. Forged by the marsh's sentient mire during the age of quiet ruin, they bore crowns of bone thorn, and their scales shimmered with runes that bled steam when angered. In the twilight of that ancient war, they passed judgment on the heretic kings by turning their cities into statues of salt and sorrow. Their coils collapsed into stone after encircling the chasm for a year and a day, their final hiss petrifying the winds themselves. And Lady Venethra the Bleak, last heir of the Thornsoul dynasty, an ancient and sorrow-wrought lineage whose bloodlines were said to descend from the Mournweavers of the etheric veil. The Thornsouls ruled from the citadel of gloaming ash, a fortress grown rather than built, shaped by the long-dead roots of the everblack tree, a sentient, primeval entity said to have been birthed in the first weeping of the world. The tree's bark whispered forgotten names, and its sap was used to seal pacts that twisted both soul and blood. It grew only in moonlight and fed on sorrow, each leaf an echo of some ancient lament. The Thornsoul dynasty claimed its roots as both cradle and crown, believing themselves to be chosen stewards of mourning, their rule justified by the melancholic wisdom the tree bled into the stone of their citadel. Their banners bore a thorn-wrapped heart bleeding over an eclipsed sun, and their scions were known for speaking in dreams and binding pacts with forgotten spirits. The dynasty's final years were marred by betrayal, prophecy, and slow dissolution as their oaths began to unravel, like ivy from a crumbling wall. It was this doom song that ushered Lady Venethra into silence, who carved her vows of silence into her bones after witnessing the betrayal of her blood-bound order during the sundering of the Seven Voices. It is said her voice once carried blessings and curses alike, but in the wake of the massacre, her kin's throats slit by dream-bound blades wielded by their own reflections. She renounced language itself. Her final words etched themselves into the air, turning to smoke. With a blade fashioned from her lover's shattered jawbone, she etched her skin with oaths of silence, then crowned herself in thorned feathers plucked from the wings of a fallen seraph. She walked into the gloom, singing nothing, her shadow trailing behind her like a weeping child. Into her bones, using a blade made from her lover's shattered jaw, then walked into the gloom wearing a crown of thorned feathers. To these were later added tales of the Oathkeeper beast, whose howl unmade oaths and split banners, its antlers adorned with fragments of broken vows written in blood ink. The howl that broke the covenant sky. A chronicle of the Oathkeeper beast and the sundering of the ninefold pact. I, the vow forging. Before the age of stone and sorrow, the ninefold concord was sworn, an accord binding mortals and lesser divinities into one undying oath, meant to chain war, love, empire, and fate itself into a harmonious lattice of eternal peace. The pact was signed not in words, but in essence. A song of 9 truths sealed beneath the covenant sky, where stars dimmed their light in agreement. At the heart of this was born the Oathkeeper beast, forged not of flesh, but of pure, sacred consequence. It was given form by the eldest vowsmiths and crowned by the gods themselves. Its role was singular and holy, to howl only when a sacred oath was broken, and in doing so, unmake the lie that had been spoken. It stalked the periphery of the realms, unseen but ever heard, a guardian of vows, its antlers recording every promise kept and shattering every one betrayed. The second, the dimming of the accord. For eons, peace reigned, not because mortals were just, but because the beast enforced the cost of betrayal with terrifying immediacy. Kings who broke truces found their crowns turned to dust. Lovers who renounced each other aged into silence. The gods themselves honored their roles, lest their temples crumble into unnames. But pride is a subtle rot. In the second moonfall, the guilt lord of Valerian, a god of wealth and forgotten hunger, sought to ascend beyond his domain by rewriting his portion of the conquered, reshaping its terms so that he alone could receive devotion without consequence. His act was subtle. He did not break the oath, he rewrote it. He made truth flinch. And in that fracture, the Oathkeeper beast stirred. The third, the first howl and the collapse. When the beast howled upon the rewritten oath, the stars themselves shattered in sympathy. The covenant sky fell, its fragments raining upon sanctuaries, obliterating temples, and erasing scriptures mid-prayer. The ninefold concord began to unbind, not with war, but with unraveling reality. The beast hunted the liars, the oath breakers, the oath twisters, and found them all. The guilt lord melted into coin-shaped screams, his temples swallowed by inkworms who fed on memory. The saint of shared breath, who broke a vow of peace, was torn into 9 wind spirits, each eternally weeping betrayal. The arch-sibyl of Varn tried to apologize. The beast heard it as a second betrayal and turned her into a bell that never rings, hung from the corpse of her own temple. The world bled silence. The pacts that bound sun to sky, breath to life, death to meaning, all began to dissolve. The fourth, the morning hunt. The beast grew mad with purpose. Its antlers became too heavy with shattered truths. Vows cracked beneath its step. Entire lineages were unborn retroactively, their family lines removed from time because an ancestor whispered an unfulfilled promise to a child. Mortals began binding false oaths, desperate to shield themselves from the beast's notice. Some tried to feed it vows to devour, but the more it consumed, the less it could distinguish between sacred and profane. Eventually, the beast's howl became constant, a drone of sorrow woven into wind, into wave, into heartbeat. V. The final vow. It was Lady Venethra the Bleak, one of the last vow-bound of the ancient world, who confronted the beast in the ruins of the Covenant Sky, a crater-ringed field of shattered truths. She knelt before it, lips sealed, oath-carved bones exposed. She wrote not in sound, but in pain, a final vow scribed into her skin with a thorn dipped in her own voice. It read, "I vow to silence the howl, not to betray it, not to cage it, but to bear it." The beast, unable to comprehend an oath that accepted consequence, placed its antlers upon her head. The runes slid from its horns into her skin. The howl passed into her soul, and in that moment, the beast collapsed. Not dead, but undone, its form dispersing into 1,000 oath-touched spirits, each one tied to a living vow still held somewhere in the world. From then on, those who break sacred promises sometimes hear a breath behind them, low and animal, a rattle of antler bone and parchment rustle. It is the fragment of the Oath Keeper. It comes not to punish. It comes to remember what you swore. And the pale revenant night, wrapped in chains of silver remorse, links forged from the regrets of fallen emperors and the lamentations of unborn prophets. Each chain hums with trapped dirges that shift with the moon's phase, binding memories too dangerous to be remembered, and curses too old to be spoken aloud, who whispered secrets of end times before stepping into the void, his eyes glazed with the reflection of 10,000 unwept funerals. Ashwalker of the moonlit dirge, the pilgrimage of the pale revenant night, keeper of unwept funerals. I, the covenant of mourning. In the beginning, when grief was young and gods still knew how to weep, there existed a covenant between the divine and the dead. All sorrow must be witnessed. For each death, a mourner. For each loss, a lament. For each fall, a remembrance. This pact was upheld by the Order of Lamentari, an ancient host of warrior eulogists sworn to carry the burdens no one else could bear. The pale revenant night was their last and most sacred creation, a soul crafted from remnant grief, cast into armor forged in the silence after mass extinction. His purpose was not to fight, but to walk, across epochs and empires, from battlefield to tomb to forgotten ruin, to bear the weight of unwept sorrow and ensure it did not poison the world. He was born not of womb, but of lament, whispered into existence by dying gods whose worshippers had all abandoned them. The chains of remorse. The Revenant's chains are his sacrament, each forged from a vow to remember a sorrow others chose to forget. The regrets of fallen emperors, who razed cities then wept only in death. The dirges of unborn prophets, silenced before their truths turned to rot. The last breath of a son, whose death went unmourned by the worlds it warmed. Each link binds not him, but the memories sealed within. They whisper their stories under moonlight and scream when he walks through places that have forgotten their dead. He is never free of them, nor does he wish to be. The pilgrimage of 10,000 shadows. The Revenant Knight's pilgrimage is endless. It began on the ridge of hollow names, where the bones of a forgotten kingdom knelt in wind, and he walked barefoot across fields of ancestral ash. From there, he crossed the weeping vale, where the sky rains blood ink from clouds stitched with regrets, and temples weep molten glass for gods who died unnamed. He journeyed through the chapel of unscreamed prayers, where no voice echoes, the sepulchral fens, where sorrow grows as moss, and the dead lie awake under shallow grief. The ruins of first weeping, where the ever-black tree once bloomed, and where silence now pulses like a wound. At each site, he does not fight. He kneels. He listens. And then he binds the grief to his chains, walking onward heavier, lonelier, and more complete. The fourth, the god that forgot to die. In the age of his deepest descent, he came upon the remnants of Soulmourn, the last of the divine melancholies, a god who refused to die because none remembered how to mourn it. Forgotten, unburied, unshriven, Soulmourn had festered, its divine sorrow turning to plague, flooding the world with invisible rot. No blade could end Soulmourn, no flame could purify it. The pale revenant night did not strike it. He whispered every funeral he'd ever carried, naming each soul forgotten by time, each heartbreak buried under conquest, each child grieved too late. He offered his chains, his silence, his endless steps. And Soulmourn, weeping with recognition, collapsed into dust, its sorrow finally given witness. From its ashes, a new dirge was born, one not of ruin, but of remembrance. V, the last eulogy. They say he now walks the spaces between death and memory, a silhouette seen at mass graves, at abandoned cenotaphs, at crumbling family shrines. His gaze is not pity, it is witness. It is said that if you light a lantern in mourning and whisper a name you never dared grieve, the revenant may pass near and offer silence in return. And if your sorrow is true, he may take one of your burdens with him, forging it into another link and walking onward. The divine grief he bears is not meant to end. It is meant to be carried. And through him, it is not forgotten. The eulogy of silver chains. Canticle 9 from the Book of Pale Grief, as transcribed by Hollow Priestess Valeth of the Ashen Chorus. First, invocation of the silent witness. In the name of the sorrow that walks, in the footfall that trembles graves unseen, we speak no word that denies the dead. We bind no wound without remembrance. Let the lantern be lit with mourning oil. Let the name be whispered once, then never again. For the Pale One has heard. Second litany of the unwept. These are the sorrows he bore before the beginning. The unborn weeping of prophets drowned in womb dream. The regrets of monarchs who crowned themselves in ash. The final breath of sons whose warmth went unloved. Chain by chain, he carries us. Link by link, we are remembered in silence. Third, the dirge stanza of the chains. O pale night, you who wear regret like armor, you whose blade is buried in the throat of history. Your chains sing not of victory, but of funerals delayed too long. Each link a lament cast in silver moonfire. Each link a covenant never honored. Each link a grief too fragile for the world to bear. You do not strike. You kneel. You do not forgive. You remember. The fourth, the benediction of burial. May he walk beside the forgotten grave. May he kneel where no mourner dares tread. May he bind our sorrow to his chain, and carry it into the void where only silence weeps true. For in the end, it is not vengeance that saves us, but the grief that survives. Rite of echoed grief, optional. Participants stand in a circle, each holding a single chain-link reliquary, typically carved from ashbone or vowstone. They pass the reliquary sunwise while chanting the final line of the dirge. What I could not mourn, I now release. The last to hold the link places it in the center upon a dish of mourning salt and extinguishes the flame, saying, "His steps are heavy with what I could not carry." Still whispered is the descent of the graven stag, an ageless beast wreathed in bark-like bone, whose every step grew thorns from stone. And of Sevelin the twice damned, draped in manuscripts of her own confessions, scrolls inked in ichor and memory, wrapped around her like funeral vestments. Each parchment bears an atrocity she both witnessed and orchestrated: the blinding of the choir of grief, the betrayal of the oracular lineage, and the unmaking of her twin soul during the Eclipse massacre. Her flesh serves as both script and reliquary, the confessions etched in a language known only to the damned. It is said that those who read too closely hear their own sins whispered back to them in her laughter, which echoes when moonlight touches the rim, whose laughter still echoes when moonlight touches the rim. Their remains are never found, only echoes of their final deeds carved into obsidian walls by unseen hands, glyphs that shift when unobserved, as if rewriting history in grief's own script. Scholars of the obsidian vault suggest the worm was not killed, but banished, drawn into a mirror plane of regret by a dying god's final lament, a liminal realm of fractured reflections and endless dusk, where light refracts into memories never lived, and time folds in upon itself like a broken spiral. Souls trapped there drift endlessly, reliving their greatest failures in looping vignettes, unable to tell if moments pass in seconds or centuries. The air there tastes like rusted lullabies, and reflections ache with unfulfilled hungers. Some whisper of starving children trapped in the echo of a banquet that never was, or warriors reliving glories they never earned, their mouths opening to songs that only bleed silence. These hungers claw not at the belly, but at the soul, gnawing at the shadow of what might have been. Time coils like a serpent around grief, hissing truths that never were. Among the forbidden relics whispered of in the sanctum beneath, the shard of Evershade, a sliver shattered from the heart mirror of Thrental during the cataclysm of 9 sorrows, when the mirror, said to contain the first regret ever uttered by sentient life, was struck by a comet of bone and starlight. Forged by the last artisan of the echoed court, in an age when silence was currency, the shard bears the agony of 1,000 forsaken promises. It is a mirrored crystal flecked with obsidian veins, of mirrored crystal flecked with obsidian veins, is said to show fleeting glimpses of this realm. Those who have gazed into it speak of seeing their own faces twisted with regrets they never lived, and one, a heretic named Iraldes Veit, returned from the trance changed, his eyes weeping ink, his voice speaking only in reversed elegy before he vanished on a windless night. Others claim it slumbers beneath the world, curled within a hollow moon that only waxes during eclipses, its serpentine coils engraved with forgotten languages that bleed ink when gazed upon, symbols so ancient they predate mourning itself. The moon is not seen by the sane, they say, but only by the bereft and the broken, drifting through the sky like a wound in reality. Its orbit is erratic, visible only in reflections cast by still water or shattered glass. where its phases do not match the heavens. Beneath its pale light, shadows stretch against the grain of time, and its surface bears craters that echo with phantom screams, some shaped like the mouths of gods who died nameless. Tombs of unfleshed memories drift across its crust like relics from unborn timelines. It whispers nightmares into the dreams of the mad and the guilt-ridden alike. Visions of children unborn with glassy, blinking eyes that weep ink. Of loves unspoken that claw through walls of memory like revenants seeking form. And of apocalypses that nearly unmade existence. Wars halted by forgotten martyrs. Voids held back by whispered names too sacred for record. The longer one dreams beneath its gaze, the less real they become, until even mirrors fail to recall them, and old friends find only static in their place. Cults have formed around these vanishings, drawing lunar sigils in salt and glass, offering blood to moons that do not rise, praying for the chance to remember what was never real. One blasphemous sect, the Hollow Choir, a blasphemous sect swathed in rags and blood-woven robes, believes the worm still lives, but has evolved into something more abstract, a god of forgetting. Their rituals are whispered in dialects no longer spoken by the sane, accompanied by the drone of flayed skin masks stitched with ash thread. They gather in candlelit oubliettes, where names are bled from their bearers and burnt in crucibles shaped like screaming mouths. Presiding over these rites are the voiceless hierophants, silent high priests who have sacrificed not only names, but identity itself, becoming flesh vessels for ancestral silence. Below them serve the memory scribes, who tattoo the erased histories onto vellum made from the skin of penitent initiates. Black incense made from burned contracts and oaths fills the air as they chant the names of the forsaken backward until meaning peels away, unraveling the soul thread by thread. Those whose names are wholly stripped become husks, shapeless echoes that drift between oubliettes, whispering fragments of forgotten lives. Their bodies remain, but their minds become vessels of silence, often taken as oracles or warnings by other cultists. They mark their tongues with sigils of silence, mutilating their mouths in ritual offerings, and worship by sacrificing their names into bonfires of burnt paper inscribed with memories they vow to relinquish. Pilgrims who listen too closely to their hymns often lose their own names, wandering empty-eyed into shadow, their memories unraveling like wet vellum. A less mystical theory comes from the last remembrancers of Icegard, who claim the Mourning Wyrm is simply dormant, entombed in a glacier of frozen time where seconds fall like snowflakes made of fractured glass, and each flake carries a frozen echo that shimmers like the afterimage of a scream caught in crystal. When touched, they chill the flesh to the bone, leaving frost-shaped bruises in the form of forgotten names. Some echoes emit low murmurs that lull the mind into forgetting its own chronology, unraveling memory like thread pulled from ancient tapestries. The glacier is said to have formed in the aftermath of Atlas's third awakening, when the Titan's heart pulsed thrice beneath the icebound meridian. The awakening ruptured ley lines and shattered the firmament, casting fragments of celestial ice into orbit and splitting the continent of Merhal into 7 drifting shards. Rivers reversed, time fractured into bleed states, one such place being the ruin of Thereth Vorn, a once golden city now suspended in a perpetual heartbeat before its fall. Its towers hover mid-collapse, flames frozen in mid-lunge toward screaming courtiers who never quite hit the ground. In the bleeding fields of Orith, soldiers eternally relive their dying breath, locked in an unbreaking cycle where swords strike but never land. Screams loop endlessly, and crows gather only to vanish with the turning of each broken hourglass sky. And for a cycle of 40 nights, stars fell upward, singing dirges of forgotten gods. In this convulsion of the world's bones, the Titan's heart briefly pulsed beneath the ice-bound meridian, freezing time itself in a radius so wide that seasons cracked and kingdoms crumbled in silence, of a scream or sob forever looping within. Shadows of bygone tragedies flicker through the ice, silent pantomimes of ancient betrayals and losses too vast to name. Forgotten voices echo in fractal patterns, weaving lullabies of despair. It awaits a sorrow vast enough to ripple across fate, a death so profound it would ring through eternity, calling it back to a world still cracked from its passing. None agree on its end, but all agree on this: the world has never truly healed. Where the Mourning Wyrm passed, the void still hums, a low, mournful sound once followed by a scholar priest named Mournhall, who vanished after 30 nights camped on the chasm's lip, transcribing its resonance. His final journal, found buried beneath a cairn of charred bones, spoke of a song beneath the silence and a shape in the dark that watched without eyes. Villagers say his ghost wanders the rim, humming in a voice not his own, a song of ending woven into a lullaby no mother ever sang. Felt more than heard, the hum is said to draw the grief-stricken and memory-lost toward the chasm's edge. Some who listen too long collapse in trance-like reverie, their minds flooded with visions of the worm's descent, flashes of cyclopean wings, a scream that cracked time, and a silence so vast it devoured prayers mid-utterance. Local superstition warns that bells ring off-pitch near the chasm, and that children born within earshot of the hum bear eyes too pale for their age, often dreaming of impossible funerals or singing songs they never learned. It is said that iron rusts faster within a mile of the rim, and that ink flows backward on parchment when held too close to the chasm. Some tombstones tilt of their own accord to face it, as if pulled by unseen gravity. Even now, the hum seeps into ruins and echoes through the hollow of dreams, a dirge too old for the gods to claim, a resonance that bleeds into architecture and memory alike, birthing cathedrals no mason recalls building, and prayers no priest remembers speaking. These cathedrals rise from the ground like ossified grief, their spires etched with shifting runes that flicker between languages thought extinct. Inside, altars weep bloodless tears into bowls of cracked glass, and each nave houses statues of deities whose names defy recollection. The doors often open into personal memories rather than rooms, hallways where a visitor might stumble upon their own birth or a death they've not yet suffered. Some say these structures rearrange themselves with each prayer uttered, growing annexes for forgotten sorrows and cloisters where monks chant in silence to gods who respond only with dreams. And so the world endures, not healed, but enduring still. Beneath the chasm's hum and the weight of unburied grief, the living weave lives from the remnants of silence. Somewhere in the echo, the worm may yet stir, not as beast nor god, but as myth made marrow, dreaming of a world that never wept enough to bring it back. Thanks for venturing into the storm with me. Every tale in this universe, from the shattered kingdoms to the cursed bloodlines, I write myself. All the art, all the visuals, every drop of atmosphere you feel, that's shaped by hand and pieced together with my passion to create. These stories take a lot of time to make real, so thank you for your patience when the drops take longer than I'd like. If you felt something during this journey, if you got goosebumps, held your breath, or just needed a break from the noise of the real world, do me a solid. Like the video, subscribe for more, and share it with a nerdy friend who needs to touch grass or get scorched by Atlas's lightning. Your support keeps this storm alive.